All right. Welcome. Good evening, good afternoon, depending on where you're joining us from today. Um, just making sure my screen looks good. Good. Um, so welcome to today's webinar. It is our second webinar of 2026. Hopefully, everybody had an opportunity to watch the year in review with Apollo Lepescu last month. Um, if you didn't get a chance to see that or any of our previous ones, please make sure you go over to apellowealth.com, click on our events tab, and you will see all of our upcoming plus all of our previously recorded and archived webinars. Please feel free to share those with as many folks as you like. Obviously, we try to put on entertaining and educational events every single month that hopefully give people some information to be better armed to make stronger, wiser financial decisions. Today's webinar is being recorded, so you'll be able to share that one once it's completed, and I would anticipate it'll be available for sharing as early as probably mid next week. We encourage you to ask questions throughout today's webinar. You'll notice probably somewhere towards the bottom of your screen a Q&A box. So go ahead and type questions in throughout. I am rolling solo here today, so I will do my best to keep an eye on those questions. I'll do my best to answer those as they come in if it's relevant to the topic we're talking about. If I miss any, I will save some time towards the end to go back and answer any questions. If I do not get a chance to get to your question today, please make sure that you reach out to your financial planner here with Apella, and they can certainly answer any questions that we do not get to. So today's topic is on Social Security and the 5 biggest questions. So what are those questions? Well, as we start to kind of dig in, some of them are going to seem pretty obvious, and some of them are probably more top of mind given some of the headlines surrounding Social Security today. First and foremost, we're going to cover when should you claim, impacts of longevity, income replacement, how taxes impact not only how the system is filled up, but how assets or cash comes out of the Social Security system, and just really understanding if it's going to be there for you, right? I think the solvency of the system is certainly top of mind for many folks today who are on the cusp of retirement, and probably the solvency is on top of mind for many of you collecting benefits today as well. So, I think as we get going here, it's important to make sure that we all have a baseline understanding of Social Security and its purpose. So, Social Security was signed into law in 1935, and it was part of the New Deal. So that gentleman right there, FDR, signed it in. Obviously, there was quite a bit going on in the economy in 1935. And what really drove this was the sheer amount of American citizens who were unemployed, could not get work, and were impoverished seniors in America. So this was really designed to help pull people out of poverty, especially those who were later in life who were not going to be able to re-enter the labor force. So it was originally called the Economic Security Act, but it was changed to the Social Security Act. Interestingly enough, a couple of fun facts around Social Security. Up until 1984, the president and Congress, and really any political appointee, was not eligible for Social Security. So that didn't happen until 1984. If you were ever at your local tavern playing some trivia around Social Security, sounds like a fun night out. A great trivia question around Social Security is the first recipient was a woman named Ida Mae Fuller. She was a legal secretary. She only worked for 3 years. She only paid $24 into the system. Her first check was $22.54. She ended up living to be 100 years old and collected a total of $22,888 in benefits. So pretty interesting that the first recipient should have kind of put right on our radar that longevity was going to impact the solvency of the system at some point in the future. So we'll talk about that as we go here. So Social Security is funded by FICA. So that's your Federal Insurance and Contributions Act, payroll taxes basically paid by workers and employers. Um, we can dig in a little bit more about the mechanics of taxes and how Social Security is funded in a bit, but I want to spend a couple of seconds here just giving a quick refresher on how benefits are calculated. Now, benefits, as some of you may know, are based on your 35 highest earning years. If you've only worked for 25 years or 30 years, anything that is not filling up to 35 years of working history are going to be filled in by zeros. So a very common question that we get around Social Security is how do I increase my benefit? How do I make it bigger? First and foremost, I would say, really make sure that when you're getting your statement or you're going online to review your statement, that your earnings history is correct. But where there is zeros, and sometimes people leave the labor force to have children, maybe they want to retire early. If you don't have 35 years, obviously working another year to replace that zero can have a big impact on the inevitable benefit that you receive. Looking at those 35 years of earning history, they are going to be indexed for inflation, right? Because obviously what you made in 1975 is not the equivalent of what you're earning today. So those wages over those 35 years are indexed for inflation. Then that number divided by 35 is applied to this, it's applied to a formula. We're not going to dig into what the formula really is, but it's a progressive formula designed to replace a larger percentage of income for lower earning people, right? So it's weighed heavier towards that kind of first income band. Once again, not important to really understand where the breakpoints are in the formula. Just understand that your average index monthly earnings are applied to this formula, and the result of that formula is something called your primary insurance amount, right? Your PIA, as you may hear it referred to throughout the rest of today's presentation. When you claim has a very big impact on your ultimate benefit that you receive on a monthly basis, but also collectively over the course of your lifetime. So thinking back to 1935 when benefits were enacted, it was designed to replace income for workers. And men were predominantly the workers in the 1930s. So when those individuals passed away, unfortunately, their wives and perhaps children were now left in the same position that the government was trying to avoid and having impoverished people who were not working. So in 1939, 4 years after the original signing of the Social Security Act, spouses, survivors, and minor children were added as beneficiaries. So the spouse was now able to collect benefits on their spouse's work record. That way, if he passed away at that time, the children and the wife were not left with zero income. So it did take 4 years, but Congress tends to take some time to get anything going these days, as well as 100 years ago. So if we think through what spousal benefits are, this is still one of the more confusing areas, I think, for folks as they try to understand their own benefits and maybe the benefits of them and their spouse. The lower earning spouse can, and when I say lower earning, you might not have any earnings history at all, right? So low to no earning spouses can receive up to 50% of the primary insurance amount of the worker. So what the primary insurance amount, once again, is the amount that the worker is entitled to at their full retirement age. So a spouse can, if I earned $3,000 as my primary insurance amount, my spouse, even if they never worked, would be eligible for half of that benefit amount. So we collectively would have $4,500. She would have $1,500. And that's with some or no earnings record. If you claim before Social Security full retirement age as a spouse, so we'll talk a little bit about that, either 66 or 67, that benefit can be reduced. There are no delayed credits on spousal benefits, which is, I think, one of the areas that is a little bit confusing to people because we always hear about the potential to delay benefits to increase our future dollar amounts and compounded earnings over time. Spousal benefits do not get any delayed credits. So if you are a spouse and your husband or wife has claimed and you want to claim off of their record, there is no benefit to waiting until after full retirement age to claim those benefits because you will not get any delayed credits. So kind of digging in a little bit more to spousal benefits here. Um, Once again, if you were born, oops, sorry about that. If you were born between 1943 and 1954, your full retirement age is roughly 66 years old. If you were born after 1960, your full retirement age is 67 years old. So you can kind of see here for this person whose full retirement age is 66, if they claim at age 66 or their full retirement age, they'll receive exactly one half of the primary insurance amount of the worker. If they claim any earlier than that, that benefit is reduced to as little as 35% of that benefit. You cannot claim any earlier than 62 as a spouse. You can see it's a little bit different, obviously, if full retirement age is 67. Once again, if you were born after 1960, your full retirement age is 67. So it can get a little bit lower just because full retirement age is a year later than in this column. So you can see that at 67, 68, 69, there is no increased benefit. So once again, just a reminder, no need to delay spousal benefits if you are claiming them at full retirement age. Um, we'll dig into this a little bit more as we kind of talk about maximizing our benefits. But to claim as a spouse, the primary worker must have already claimed their benefit, right? And that's a little bit different. There were some scenarios 10 years ago that you were able to file and suspend. You're not allowed to do that anymore. So the primary worker must have filed for his or her benefits. The spouse must be at least 62 years old. Um, and the spousal benefit is based on the worker's primary insurance amount, not the actual benefit. So what does that mean? If I am the primary worker in this scenario and my full retirement age benefit is $3,000, but I delay until I'm 68 years old or 69 years old or 70 years old, my benefit might go up to $4,000, for example. My spouse's spousal benefit is going to be based on what I would have claimed at full retirement age, not the benefit I'm entitled to today. So that's another area of confusion around spousal benefits. It's around the primary insurance amount, which is the amount you're entitled to or the working spouse is entitled to at their full retirement age. Not if they're getting delayed credits, just the full retirement age benefit. And the marriage requirement is 1 year. So that's a little bit of background on the history of the system and just kind of getting the off the ground with a quick refresher on benefits, how they're calculated, and a quick update and refresher on spousal benefits. So let's dig into one of the first questions, and this is a big one. This is going to be kind of a theme throughout today's presentation around when. And when is a very personal question, and I think we might have 300 or 400 people on here today, and the answer for when might be different for every single one of you. I don't want to casually tell people, and despite what you're going to see on the next slide, there's no perfect answer. Everything is based on the results of a holistic financial plan to understand the need, the impact of delaying, claiming early, other assets, work, etc. So we're going to go through a couple of scenarios here, but please don't take this as gospel as when you should claim personally. These are just some examples and a little bit of a framework to think through the decision-making tree. So as we're all looking at this together, this is a good way, if you were a single individual, to put the claiming process into context. So if we are going to start with the basic question of, are we working? If the answer is yes, we probably should not claim benefits. And we'll talk about why momentarily. But if we're working, let's just say that we're not going to claim benefits. Um, the second question is, well, if you answer no to that question, well, you have to kind of go on to, do you have other sources of income? And that might be a pension, that might be real estate, it could be a lot of different things. If the answer to that question is no, then you can consider claiming your benefit. Um, if you have other sources of income, now we have to kind of move into the longevity question, right? And this is the one that I think plagues the decision-making process for so many people. Life expectancy and how long do any of us think we're going to live? So we're going to go just kind of based on health and maybe a diagnosis that we have, right? Do we believe, based on kind of our own personal health circumstances, family history, that we would live beyond age 77? If the answer to that question is no, and remember, we're talking about a single individual, not a married couple here. It gets a little bit more complicated as a married couple. If the answer to that question is no, then we can consider taking our benefits as early as 62. If the answer is yes, we kind of go on to this next break point for age. And do we think that we're going to live past the age of 81? And 81 has been kind of this line in the sand where if you are going to live past the age of 81, delaying benefits until age 70 actually accounts for more in cumulative benefits over the course of your lifetime than if you were going to claim at full retirement age or earlier. So, kind of thinking through this framework, if you're going to live, if you believe you're only going to live to 77 or less, maybe we decide to potentially take benefits earlier. If we're going to live somewhere between 77 and 81, or that's kind of where we feel our sweet spot is, maybe 67 would be the right time for you. If we're going to live beyond age 81, we would consider claiming at age 70 to get some of those delayed credits. So let's talk a little bit about the delayed credits and kind of well, we'll start with what benefits are. And we're going to use this as kind of a baseline example for a couple of different slides here. So we're going to talk about a monthly benefit at $2,000 with 2% cost of living adjustments on it. So, understanding that Social Security is, for many people, the one source of cash flow they have in retirement that is indexed for inflation and money that they're not going to outlive. So this benefit, indexed at 2% cost of living adjustments, if we live 10 years in retirement, we would accumulate about $262,000 plus in total lifetime benefits. If we lived 30 years in retirement, that's almost $1 million. So as we start to think about this decision-making framework, it's really important to understand that I don't think any of us are taking $1 million decision very lightly. So we want to put a lot of thought into this, and which is why I always encourage this to be part of a larger holistic financial plan, rather than just making a judgment based on kind of what we heard, what we read, maybe what our neighbor is doing. This is a very personal decision. And when we're talking about $1 million, once again, that requires probably a little bit more thought. Most of us don't live our lives thinking about cumulative benefits. We live month to month on some type of budget, some cash flow, some understanding. So if we take that same $2,000 benefit with that same cost of living adjustment at 2%, the important thing to note here is that in 10 years, your benefit is not going to be just $2,000 anymore. It's going to be up to $2,438. And in 30 years, that benefit is going to be roughly $3,700. So, as you can see, there's a big impact to your monthly benefit, which is important because I think over the course of time, we all understand the impact of the rising cost of goods and services. We've certainly felt that pinch very much over the last few years. So, just thinking through very simplistically, 2.8% cost of living adjustments is kind of the average over time historically for cost of living adjustments to Social Security. So you can see what the dollar for dollar impact is at that historic level. So if your benefit is $3,000, that would be an $84 impact in 1 year to your benefit, and you can see that increasing. So that's going to once again compound year over year over year over year. So hopefully you can keep up with the rising costs of goods and services. As we look back historically at cost of living adjustments on the Social Security benefit, you can see that it varies very greatly over time. In 2022 and 2023, if you kind of go over this right-hand column here, you can notice that this is, let's see if I can get this little laser pointer function to work here. You can see hopefully my red dot in 22 and 23. The kind of period of hyperinflation that we lived through, the cost of living adjustment to Social Security was nearly 6% and nearly 9% in those 2 years. But there have been a lot of years like 17, 16, 10, 11, where the increase to your Social Security benefit would be or would have been zero. So just important to kind of look at over the last 30 or so years what the cost of living adjustments have looked like historically. Now, I mentioned longevity earlier, and this is going to kind of cover two big questions here, right? Longevity, and is this going to be enough? So as we dive a little bit further into this conceptually, I want to call your attention to these life expectancy tables. And you might have to squint a bit depending on the device that you're looking at here. But I'm going to take it in a couple of different columns here. So we're going to focus on the purple area first. And what you notice in here, this is women at different age brackets, right? So at age 85, age 90, 95, and 100. The dark purple is the total population of women and their life expectancy. So if you are a woman in America, there is about a 52% chance that you will live until age 85, a 31% chance that you'll live to age 90, and so on. But if you are a non-smoker in excellent health, your probability of living to age 85 is actually around 73%. To age 90 is more than a coin flip, which is meaningful, and that's 53%. This green column here, or these green columns, are the same metrics for men, but at slightly lower percentages. So if you are a healthy non-smoking male in America, you have about a 64% chance to live to age 85 and about a 43% chance to live to age 90. Well, what happens when these two individuals get married? Well, the probability that one of those individuals lives until age 85 is now 90%. And the probability that one of those individuals, healthy non-smokers, lives to 90 is 73%. And it's almost a coin flip that one of you will live until age 95. So this is where, when I'm having discussions with individuals, whether we're doing a financial plan for them, whether it's just somebody who's asking a question, generally speaking, during one of my presentations on this topic, almost nobody believes they're going to live that long. And these numbers are updated every couple of years. So this one is from 2024. I do not have the 2025 numbers yet, but life expectancy is continuing to increase. So, I think it's really important as you're starting to think about your own longevity, that we're more realistic about it because the numbers tell a different story maybe than what we're thinking about our own longevity. Now, I understand that there's plenty of reasons based on personal health, diagnosis, family history where we might not feel that way. But this is a situation where I think it's important to kind of play these scenarios out and make sure that you're prepared for the long term. When we do financial plans for individuals, we're planning to at least age 95 for at least one spouse to be a survivor because we really want to stress test to make sure that when you get to the end of that financial plan that you're still able to live your best life. So I think we hope for the best and plan for the worst. And unfortunately for many folks, they underestimate their own longevity. On the other side of this is how much of my pre-retirement income is going to be replaced by Social Security. And I know we didn't dig into the formula for calculating Social Security, but there's three bend points in there. And Social Security, as you can kind of tell just by looking at this chart, is really designed to replace more income, a higher percentage of income for lower earners, right? And that makes sense, I think, right? Because higher earners have an ability to save in a more easily. I certainly don't want to cast everybody into a particular bucket, but the higher earner that you are, the more opportunity that you have to save for your own financial future. So as you look through this, we'll kind of pick out a couple of these. At $100,000 of income, right, pre-retirement, you need to replace about 76% of your pre-retirement income. Now, about 24% drops off because you're no longer saving in your retirement plan. Maybe your health insurance premiums are different. You're not gassing up the car as frequently, et cetera. Once again, not everybody fits into this bucket. These are pretty good numbers in this particular study, but really at $100,000, Social Security is only replacing about 33% of your pre-retirement income. And if you're a person or a couple who's earning $250,000 to $300,000, it's less than 20% of your pre-retirement income that Social Security is replacing. So, it's really, really important that we're still saving aggressively. I don't think any of us are reliant on Social Security as a system to replace all of our income, but it is extraordinarily important if there are folks on this call today who are still in the retirement saving portion of their lives to continue to save aggressively and make sure that you're running those financial plans because obviously you are responsible for a very large chunk of income replacement when you finally hang up the work boots. So, as we continue to dig into some of these numbers here, I'm going to go and kind of change the numbers a little bit. And we're going to go with more of an average retirement benefit that we see at $2,400. So if your primary insurance amount, the amount that you're entitled to at your full retirement age is $2,400 and you're born in this time frame here, 1943 to 54, your retirement age is 66. So retire at 66, you get 100% of that benefit. Retire at 62 and claim Social Security, your benefit is now instead of $2,400, $1,800. On the other side of that, if our full retirement age is 67, remember you were born after 1960, you can see if you retire as early as 62 and claim Social Security that your benefit will be reduced to roughly $1,700 or 70% of your primary insurance amount. So it's a pretty big discrepancy. And, it kind of when we think about the math of cost of living adjustments, and we've seen the impact of those things being as high as 7 or 9% in a couple of slides earlier. Those are really magnified over time on larger dollar amounts. So if you claim early, your benefit will stay lower for life because you can get back up to this, but it's going to take a really long time with cost of living adjustments. So your base number stays lower, and then you're getting those cost of living adjustments on top of that. So you're compounding your ultimate amount is going to be much, much lower when you're in your 80s and 90s. And we'll look at that as part of the decision-making framework here momentarily. But on the other side of the coin, rather than thinking about claiming benefits early and having it be a consequence of having a reduced benefit, you can have an increased benefit. So if your full retirement age is 66 and you waited until 67, your benefit is now 108% of that benefit, 116, 124, 132%. So your benefit is no longer $2,400. At age 70, it is now almost $3,200. If your full retirement age is 67 Obviously, there's one less year to claim, right? Because you're retiring and claiming benefits at full retirement age of 67 versus 66. But still, that benefit amount at 8% delayed credits gets you up to about $3,000. And that's meaningful when we're talking about cumulative lifetime benefits as well. So this 8% delayed credit is really important to remember because I think as you kind of go through and you see sometimes the fluctuations in the stock market, or you look at your overall asset level, things that you keep in the bank, CDs, savings bonds, corporate bonds, stocks, etc. It is very hard to find something that is going to get you a known 8% rate of return. So this is a meaningful thing that over time can have a significant impact, especially when we're starting to talk about survivors, right? When we get into our 80s and 90s, and maybe one spouse passes away at that time, it's these delayed credits, along with cost of living adjustments, are a really meaningful, a really meaningful impact to our surviving spouses. So I've been blabbering for a while, but I've never actually answered the question, when should I claim? And I'm going to take you back to what I was just talking about at 62 versus 70. So kind of thinking through, once again, this primary insurance amount of $2,400. If you were to claim at 62, your benefit is reduced. Claim at 70, your benefit is increased. The difference between these two benefits here, right? Cumulative over the course of your lifetime, living to age 85 with just 2% cost of living adjustments. Your cumulative benefits, if you had claimed early, would be about $638,000. If you delayed your benefits until age 70, your cumulative benefits would be $811,000. And that matters quite a bit, especially when you start to look at the monthly income, right? Your monthly income at age 85 would be $2,700 if you claimed early, but nearly $5,000 if you delayed. Now, I don't make light of it, the fact that, you have to have other assets or you need to continue to work, because many people need to claim Social Security, right? Just as a source of income. I see the question about full retirement age and earnings, and still being able to collect Social Security. I'm going to touch on that in 1 second, Michael. So let me circle back to you. So here's kind of a great framework to think through the decision-making process. Now, I talked earlier about the decision tree, and the idea of your own personal health status. We understand that healthy couples, healthy individuals have probably a longer life expectancy than we would normally guess for ourselves. But when you do have a health risk, a health issue, I think that has to be factored at number one in the decision-making framework, right? Thinking through, if I don't have a health issue or if I'm in excellent health, I really need to plan for the longest possible life expectancy. But my claiming decision also needs to really focus on and touch on the need for income. Even if I retire at, say, 65 or 66 years old, can I live off of cash reserves, investments, anything else that I have to allow my own benefit to continue to compound, getting those 8% delayed credits, 8% delayed credits, 8% delayed credits? For some people, the answer is absolutely, I can do that. And for others, it becomes a little bit more iffy, right? I understand that everybody has different financial circumstances and that certainly investments, cash, are a finite resource. So this is a very personal decision here. What I would say also impacts this decision, and if we kind of take I think the mental approach that going in that I have assets in reserve, I would love to delay, but if the market goes haywire, right? Pretend it's 2007, 2008, and the market pulls back 20, 30, 40%, God forbid. I need to probably just say, okay, well, I'm going to leave my investments alone. I'm going to keep my cash reserves because I need that to bounce back with the market as it ticks back up. And I'm just going to claim Social Security now. So there's a lot of things that factor into the decision-making framework. If you plan to work, if you're working up until full retirement age, and especially if you're working beyond full retirement age, it probably makes a ton of sense to go ahead and delay and claim those extra benefits, especially if that cash is not needed. And then we also need to talk about survivor benefits because Social Security can have a meaningful impact to our spouses that we leave behind should we predecease them. And we'll touch on that momentarily as well. So if we think just kind of purely trying to answer the question and in broad strokes here, if our goal is to just maximize, my spouse and I want to get the most out of the system as possible, right? That's the only thing we care about. Get the most out of the system because I feel I'm entitled to it. Well, here's one situation where we would say, okay, well, if the lower earning spouse, right, I'm working and my spouse is working. In this case, my spouse has a lower Social Security benefit or primary insurance amount than I do, but it's higher than half of mine. Both of us should probably delay until age 70 to get the most out of the system as possible. So if my spouse, their primary insurance amount is higher than 50% of mine, my goal is to maximize, get the most out of the system. We both delay till age 70. Right? That might not make sense for anybody, but if your goal is to just get the most out of the system as humanly possible, that is how you would do it. If you're thinking about this kind of hybrid, right, where, my benefit is $3,000 and I'm married and my spouse's benefit is $1,200, right? So less than 50% of my benefit. The lower earning spouse would claim early, and I, as the higher earning spouse, would delay mine until age 70. This gets a little bit of income into the system sooner while still maximizing the higher of the two benefits. This is a strategy that, I do encourage pretty frequently for folks. We want to try to always make sure when and if possible that we are maximizing the highest earning spouse and getting delayed credits if possible. And that is probably my number one goal as an advisor to try to encourage the highest earning spouse to maximize their benefit as an insurance policy for cash flow into the next 10, 20, and 30 years, hopefully. This is an interesting one that we could probably do an entire session just on divorce spousal benefits, but I'll take it kind of just as it's presented on the screen. Divorce spouses can absolutely receive Social Security benefits based on their ex's record. There's some complexities into that, but kind of on the screen are really some just key numbers and dates that we need to think about. As long as your marriage lasted at least 10 years, you are entitled to claim off of that divorced spouse's benefit. If you are the person claiming off of somebody else's benefit, you have to be unmarried, right? So if I got divorced and it's been 10 years and I want to claim off of my ex-spouse's benefit, I cannot, in fact, get remarried or be remarried. I would be ineligible for that benefit. The ex-spouse. If the ex-spouse is 62 years old, then it does not even matter. Well, think about it this way. If the ex-spouse is 62, you can claim off of their benefit at any time. So if you're 67 and they're 60 and you want to claim off of their record, you have to wait until they're 62, unless the divorce has been at least 2 years ago. If the divorce was more than 2 years ago, then they don't have to have filed for their benefit. So, as we think through the complexities around divorce, I think, always going and talking to somebody, even if it's at the Social Security Administration, they can really help. I know kind of the idea of going to a Social Security office can be a little daunting because of the wait times and the challenges there. But remember, this system's been around for a really, really long time, almost 100 years at this point. So it's a pretty well-oiled machine in understanding of the rules. Now, does that mean they get it right every single time? No, but they do have kind of all the information there. As long as you can prove that you were married to this person, marriage certificate, divorce certification, then they can provide all the information to you. So, if you are going to schedule an appointment at the Social Security office, just make sure that when you're doing that, that you're asking, what exactly do I need to bring in for you to be able to help me? Because going down there without the correct information can create a need to go back again. And the only thing worse than going once is going twice. So, kind of just to reiterate, um, divorce has its own set of rules. And this first bullet point I relate back to Johnny Carson. I think Johnny Carson was married 4 times, and I think three of the women he was married to for more than 10 years. So in that example, even if I'm a little bit off in the facts there, in that example, um, those three individuals would all get a similar benefit. Their benefits would not be reduced because he was married 4 times, right? They would have essentially the same benefit. Johnny's benefit would not have been reduced because 4 people were claiming off of his benefit. So kind of just thinking through that, more than one X can claim off of your record without impact to either of those X's or to your own benefit. Um, as you think about remarriage, I mentioned this earlier. If you are divorced, claiming Social Security benefits and intend to get remarried, the benefits will stop. So, just a consideration, not telling you not to get remarried, but certainly an important thing to remember. A question just came in. What benefit does the X receive? Is it dependent on their age or their primary insurance amount? So it works exactly like spousal benefits. So if you're an ex who earned less than the spouse you divorced, you would get up to 50% of their benefit. If you claim early, that would be reduced as well. So as it can be as low as I think 32% of the benefit. So between 32 and 50% essentially of your divorced spouse's primary insurance amount. Good question. I failed to include a slide here on death and survivor benefits. So I'm going to touch on it now with no visual here. And there was a question from Gail about if a spouse dies before claiming Social Security, can the spouse file on their behalf? So a couple of things around survivor benefits. You have to have been married for at least 1 year. You, as the survivor, have to be at least 60 years old, right? So for claiming other benefits, it's 62. As a survivor, it is 60 years old. It can be as early as 50 years old if you are disabled. If you have children who are under the age of 16, they can also claim survivor benefits. Um, so, in this example, well, a good example now is, right, I just saw that at age 70 something, Robert De Niro and Al Pacino have had children. God forbid either one of them pass away, great American icons and actors, that their children would be entitled to Social Security benefits because they are under the age of 16. Um, so, I think that's important. For most married couples, and I'll get to your answer, your question, Gail, in 1 second. When you think about, and I'll just kind of make up an example. I'm married and my benefit is $3,000 a month personally, and my spouse's benefit is $2,000 a month. If I pass away, her benefit of $2,000 a month will go away and she will step into the larger of the two benefits, right? So you cannot have two benefits carrying on when one spouse passes away. That's really the reason we are trying to maximize the highest earning spouse's benefit. Because at some point in the future, one of those benefits is going to go away, right? It's just inevitable. We want to make sure that we're maximizing that so that when a household goes from two lines of cash flow down to one, that there isn't as much disruption financially. So you cannot continue with both of those, just the higher of. If your spouse has not claimed Social Security yet, you would still be entitled to their benefit amount at the time that they passed away. So that I think that kind of directly answers your question, Gail. Um, where it gets a little bit more complicated and there are some different rules is around the survivor's opportunities. So in this particular case, if there's a surviving spouse and they're 62 years old and they're going to claim on their spouse's record, they could claim that benefit as a surviving spouse and delay their own benefit amount, right? So there's this kind of rule that went away for most of Social Security recipients except surviving spouses. So if I were married and my spouse passed away, I had not claimed my own benefit, but my spouse did, I could claim on their record. Let's just pretend I was 65 years old. And not working. I'm going to claim on their benefit and I'm going to defer my own benefit until age 70. That would give me 5 years of cash flow as a survivor based on their record. And at age 70, I get all those delayed credits and I flip over to mine. So it's a little bit more complicated because there's that opportunity. So if you know anybody who is in that situation, please make them aware that there are strategies and opportunities to maximize their benefit while still claiming survivor benefits now. Remember, it's 60, 50 if you're disabled, 16 if you if you have children under the age of 16. So, I think also I just kind of want to mention too, if you're claiming at 60 as a spouse, as a surviving spouse, your benefit is going to be reduced and earnings can erode that. So if you're still working, you just don't get that on top of it, right? There's an earnings cap that we'll talk about in 1 second here. But at age 60, your benefit would be reduced to about 70% of the surviving spouse. If you kind of go up till full retirement age, you can get 100% of that full retirement age surviving spouse's benefit. So it's just like anything else. Claim early, the amount that you're going to receive is going to be reduced. So and it's very complicated around the areas of death. It's very complicated around divorce. I would encourage any of you going through any of those to talk to somebody. I'm a little bit behind on time here, so we're going to dive kind of right into the universe of taxes here. So let's just jump in, and then I'll try to do my best to get to some of these other questions here. But I want to make sure that we cover the high points because I think taxes around Social Security are very misunderstood. So there's something called the earnings test, and this is what I was talking about, even with a surviving spouse claiming a survivor's benefit, spouses or anybody continuing to work, but also wanting to potentially claim Social Security. There's something called the earnings test, and there's a threshold, right? So if you are under full retirement age, FRA, once again, stands for full retirement age, and receiving benefits, meaning you've claimed your Social Security benefit, the most you can earn in 2026 is $24,480. That's obviously up from last year, but it's still not very much money, right? So it's very important that you understand what your earnings potential is in the calendar year before you claim Social Security, because over this amount, over $24,480, Social Security is going to withhold $1 for every $2 over that amount. So if you were earning $100,000 and you wanted to claim Social Security, basically your benefit would be reduced kind of down to zero. The rules are a little bit different in the year that you turn your full retirement age. It becomes a 1-to-3 ratio over $65,000. But this is kind of what's talked about a lot in terms of working and the earnings test threshold. So, I'll kind of use the example of somebody that I know claiming Social Security who works at my local golf course as a starter. They make about $15,000 a year, doing it part-time, a couple of days a week on the local golf course. No big deal. They're under this threshold. Their benefits are not impacted. But if there was a golf pro, for example, and they were earning $75,000 a year, $50,000 it would be over this $25,000 limit. So there would be a massive withholding of benefits there. So, important that you really understand kind of how your earnings are going to look as you're planning your claiming strategy, which is why kind of that number one step in the decision framework is, are you going to work or are you still working? If the answer is yes, delay, right? That's almost always the answer. It's not always, but it's almost always the answer. If you're going to work, delay your benefit. The first year earnings test, right? So, um, once again, I'm not going to spend too much time on this because it's not my most favorite area to talk about, and probably not yours either. But that $24,000 roughly amounts to $2,000 a month. Um, Once you get to full retirement age and beyond, right? So let's just say your full retirement age is 66, and now you're 67 years old, 68 years old, and you want to claim Social Security and you're making $250,000, your benefit will not be impacted, right? You'll get your full benefit amount because you are no longer under that full retirement age and no longer subject to that earnings test. So we get questions about this all the time, and possibly if you're still working, you're wondering, hey, where does all that money go that I'm paying into this system? What is FICA anyway? Well, there is an earnings cap on Social Security, right? So if you're employed and paying into the Social Security system, your earnings are capped at $184,000, meaning you're paying 6.2% payroll tax up to $184,000, $184,500. If you make $200,000, then that next $15,500, you're not paying Social Security tax on that. This threshold is up from the previous year. It is indexed for inflation. It does continue to increase. Important to note, there's a question around Medicare earlier that I didn't get to. Medicare has no earnings cap, right? So the tax you pay on Medicare, if you make $1 billion this year, you'll pay that Medicare tax all the way up to that $1 billion. This, if you make $1 billion, you're really only paying Social Security tax up to $184,000. So that is a very common question. And just remembering as you start to look at your own paycheck, maybe a little bit more closely these days, if you're an individual, you're paying 6.2% and your employer is paying the other 6.2%. If you're self-employed, then you're paying the full 12.4%. There has been no change to the Medicare tax. That still stays at 1.45%. And that is, once again, on all earnings. If you're self-employed, it is obviously double that at 2.9%. So if we think about what the total amount that a high earner is going to pay into the system, at $184,500 at 0.62 at 6.2%, it's under $12,000. Right. So when we're thinking about what are we putting into the system versus what are we getting out of it, if we live a very long time in retirement, we are probably going to maximize our contributions to this system. I go all the way back to Ida Mae Fuller, the first recipient of Social Security who lived to 100. Right. She paid $22 into the system and got far more out of it for a longer period of time. Once again, if you're self-employed, that'll just be doubled. You're paying the full 12.4% tax. And yes, you get taxed on the way out also. This is a common point of confusion because you would think, as I've been taxed and I paid into the system, why would I pay tax on the way out and when I start to get my benefit? Interestingly enough, in this provisional income, which is yet another confusion in the tax code, The only place provisional income really shows up is when it's around Social Security. And if you look at these thresholds, well, first I'll define it, right? How is Social Security taxed? How do they figure out what's taxable? It's going to take your AGI. It's going to add in one half of your Social Security benefit and all of your tax exempt interest. That equals provisional income. And tax exempt interest is, just think of municipal bonds. So this is a new definition of income, provisional income. And it gets applied to these tiers right here. So provisional income under $32,000, none of your Social Security benefit is subject to tax. If you earn between $32,000 and $44,000, uh, roughly 50% of your benefit is taxed, and over $44,000, up to 85% of your benefit is taxed. Now, once again, just to kind of provide a little clarity here, 85% of you're not paying 85% tax, just 85% of your benefit is taxable at whatever rate you're paying. So if you're in the marginal 15% tax bracket, you're paying 15% up to 85% of your Social Security benefit. Now, as you look at this, these numbers kind of seem incredibly low, and I would agree with you. So if we think about the original Social Security Act, the president and members of Congress were excluded from being able to receive benefits, and that was changed in 1984. Also changed in 1984 was this idea, well, people are getting rich off of Social Security, so let's tax them. These thresholds were enacted in 1984 as part of that same act that allowed our Congress people to get benefits, but these were never indexed for inflation. So we're going back to 1984 numbers with no index for inflation. So this became a tax on what they considered to be the wealthy at that time. And it became eventually a tax on the middle class. And now you can say that this is a tax on the lower to middle class. So I don't know why this has never been addressed, but right now these are the thresholds that were enacted in 1984. And this kind of term of provisional income, you'll really only hear it around Social Security, but important to note. So as we start to think about like, okay, well, if that's meaningful to you, how do we reduce those levels of income? Well, let's think about the things that are impacting income in retirement. That might be portfolio, dividends, interest. It might be if you have a pension. But the big one for most people are required minimum distributions. And a little refresher on required minimum distributions. Previously, you had to start taking distributions from your IRA at age 70 and a half. A couple of years ago, that was raised to 72. And then starting last year, it was actually increased to 73. So the amount that you're forced to take from your IRAs has now been delayed to age 73. But for most people, once required minimum distributions kick in, we're kind of in that provisional income up to 85% of our benefits going to be taxed. So we're constantly trying to figure out, okay, well, how do we keep more of what we earn and how do we reduce tax exposure as much as we possibly can? So, we have very little wiggle room in here because those thresholds were never indexed for inflation. So there's not a ton of room to play. So most of these things are great conceptually, probably have farther reaching consequences that might be more helpful to you in the context of your financial plan and creating wealth across generations, but are not going to do a ton for you in the universe of reducing Social Security tax exposure specifically. So, as we think, okay, well, how do we start to prepare for this inevitability around required minimum distributions and increasing the amount of tax I will have to pay on my Social Security? We can start to draw down IRAs earlier. This is a common thing, not that we do for the purposes of Social Security in particular, but to reduce future required minimum distributions, to preserve assets for future generations, for longevity planning, for generational wealth transfer. I understand that you have to take money at age 73. There's nothing to say that you can't take it at 65, 66, 67. So what we do is a process called filling up the tax bracket. We want to make sure that we're filling up lower tax thresholds if we know that we're going to be in a higher one in 3, 4, 5, 6, 10 years. So filling up and maximizing kind of tax bracket management is one way to head off some tax on Social Security. Similarly, doing that with Roth conversions, kind of the same idea, but rather than taking money out of IRAs, we're converting IRAs. And once again, delaying Social Security to age 70 so that the time period that you are impacted by this provisional income tax is minimized. Now, once again, I think all these things are great conceptually, but at the end of the day, I would say that most of the folks that we work with have amounts inside of their retirement accounts, required minimum distributions that make massive Roth conversions challenging, still worth exploring. Drawing down IRAs, interesting, but for the purposes of reducing exposure to provisional income tax in Social Security, this is not something I would spend a ton of time ripping my hair out trying to figure out. So as we kind of think through, we can kind of look at reducing the impact of income in our investment portfolio. I don't love that idea either, but it is an option. Remember, municipal bonds are a part of that provisional income. So thinking that you might just convert stocks to bonds or dividend payers to tax-free, that's not going to work. Thinking through once again the future required minimum distributions, very important, and you should work with your advisor to really understand how your required minimum distributions project over the next 10, 20, and 30 years. We've got calculations that we can certainly show you to see what it does to not only your tax bracket but your cash flow projections as you start to think through that phase of your life. Delaying Social Security, I'm obviously a huge fan of that. Reducing expenses, paying down debt, and adopting a simpler lifestyle. Anybody who knows me knows that I will never suggest that to most people because, at the end of the day, what we want for our folks that we work with is to have the best possible retirement phase, to not live a life less interesting or worse than what their dreams were. So simplifying their lives, sure. Reducing frivolous expenses, okay. But we want you to live your absolute best life. And once again, trying to dodge provisional income tax, not a worthwhile exercise. As we dive in, I'm just going to say quickly here, because this is the one I think it gets a lot of the headlines, and I know we're up against time, so I appreciate you sticking through this with me here. Social Security was designed to be a pay-as-you-go system, right? So payroll taxes come from current workers, they go into a trust fund, and they're immediately paid out to recipients. But because baby boomers have been in their peak earning years, the trust fund accumulated more than was anticipated for current benefits. So right now, I think at the end of 2024, I don't have the 2025 numbers, roughly $2.7 trillion. Those dollars are invested in special issue treasury securities. But as more people begin to retire, and there's this huge wave of kind of pending retirements here, as more people start to retire and claim benefits, we're going to see a big acceleration in the depletion of that particular fund. And when we look at it, without any reform by 2034, and these projections are maybe a bit dated here, but the system will only be able to cover about 81% of benefits. So there's a few different things, in terms of ideas, right? We can increase that $184,000 base rate rather than just have it indexed for inflation. We can add $100,000 to it to make it more like Medicare. It could be potentially uncapped. We've done this already. We can increase full retirement age. We can just accept lower benefits or lower cost of living adjustments. All these things have a tremendous impact on the system. I think these first two are the most legitimate and realistic options that we'll see at some point. But, when you think about kind of how politics works today, I wouldn't anticipate anything's going to happen anytime soon until we get much closer to D-Day, right? We don't tend to act politically until we absolutely have to. And you can kind of look at every government shutdown that we've ever had, right? It's always the 11th hour. So I don't know that we'll have an answer anytime soon. But I can say with some level of confidence that our politicians who many of them, unfortunately being career politicians, want to continue to get reelected. And it would be very difficult to continue to get reelected if you were going to disrupt the largest voting base in our country. So at some point, I think something will be done to create solvency in the system. I would not expect that anytime in 2026. I know I'm way over here, so thanks for hanging out with me. One big thing here, bonus for folks. I didn't plan for this, but um, this happened last year. So on January 5th of last year, the Social Security Fairness Act was passed by Congress with actual bipartisan support, and it repealed the windfall elimination provision and the government pension offset. So that impacted many, many teachers, police officers, firefighters, people who were employed by their state, local governments, who were not going to be able to claim Social Security or did not have Social Security deducted from their taxes because they were part of a pension system. So under this, what happened was survivors or people who maybe worked in the private sector and in the public sector had greatly reduced benefits or were not eligible for survivor benefits. Long story short, that was repealed last year. So if you were under the belief that being married to a person who is a police officer or as a government worker yourself, that your own benefit was going to be impacted, your potential surviving benefit was going to be impacted. That has been removed as part of this Fairness Act. So that's really great news for everybody who was otherwise, I think, unfairly treated for a great period of time here. So this was fantastic news. One of the better things that we've seen happen in the universe of Social Security in a great amount of time here. So um, once again, we covered so much here today that obviously I think you probably all have questions about your own personal circumstances. I would encourage you to reach out to your wealth advisor, have a conversation with them about Social Security, the right strategy for yourself, because we're talking about decisions that impact your surviving spouse. We're talking about decisions that are in the hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollar range, and we should not take those types of things lightly. So I appreciate it. I'm going to click on this disclosure slide, and then I'm going to go back to this. I think some of these questions I did answer in here, but I'll say, let's see, Mike, rules for spousal benefits. I'm in early retirement age now, but waiting to claim later. If I pass before I claim, can my spouse or estate claim the benefit? So the estate can't, but your spouse would be able to claim on your full retirement age primary insurance amount benefit. Absolutely, even if you had not claimed your own benefit. I think I answered that one. Social Security at full retirement age, how much can I earn in retirement and still collect Social Security? If you are full retirement age, earn away. There is no income limitation. The earnings test will not apply. Around Medicare being a separate function at 65 and Part B action is still. So, Social Security is similar but different than Medicare. We can absolutely do one of these sessions on Medicare. The good news is around Medicare, you can claim Medicare before you claim Social Security. You'll just have to pay the premiums. Once you claim Social Security, Medicare will come right out of your Social Security check. There is a hold harmless provision in Social Security and Medicare, meaning that if the cost of living adjustment on my Social Security benefit is 1% this year, but healthcare costs go up 5% as they have in previous years, and my Medicare premiums go up 5%, I actually can't go up more than that 1% cost of living adjustment. So my cost of living adjustment can get eroded, but my benefit will not continue to decrease based on healthcare costs being higher. Dependent adult child with special needs, can they receive survivor benefits? only if they are under the age of 16. Unfortunately, there's different benefits for special needs and other family members with challenges. And then I think I touched on the Congress and I think they will do something eventually, but not tomorrow. Um, just trying to get through a couple of more of these. Let's see. Actually, I think I got to most of these. How is deferred income treated with respect to taking Social Security? Yep, so that will impact Social Security if you are claiming early. If you are not claiming early, then no impact to you at all. Deferred income will not count as part of filling up zeros if that's what you're asking in terms of your 35 highest earning years. Unfortunately, can't give a copy of the presentation slides itself, but you will be able to watch the recording hopefully early next week. I realize I went 10 minutes long, so I do appreciate the couple hundred of you who hung on with me here past dinner time for maybe some of you. We look forward to seeing you all again next month when we dive into the world of taxes. And I really appreciate everybody hanging on and being a part of these webinars. We hope that it was helpful. We hope that you learned something. If you have any questions, please, please, please reach out to your wealth advisors and ask those questions directly about your own. And certainly we hope to hear from you with any other suggestions, questions, thoughts, comments that you have. Please feel free to reach out and share this recording with your friends, families, or colleagues, etc. So thank you again. We look forward to next time. Take good care. Have a great night, and we'll see you all very soon.